Я Mark
Good
Grigorian.
day. I am Mark Grigorian. You're watching one more discussion of Future Talks. Today, I'm joined by the founder of the School of Armenian Language, Tumanyan.Online, and the author of the Armenian YouTube channel, Repat Riarch, Hayk Hovakimyan. We will be discussing problems with education, information, internet, and the media. But Hayk, before starting this discussion, I'd like to say just several words about the following. In the series of interviews of Future Talks, I'm purposefully avoiding giving, evaluating, or judging today's political events. The goal of today's these episodes, these series, is to discuss our future, the future of our children, and the future of our grandchildren. But the events of the recent days are greatly concerned from the point of view of what the future of our country and the nation will look like. What will it be like when the stress of the recent events wears down? It may seem that talking about education nowadays is wrong, but I do not want to talk about politics. Many experts and experienced people are talking about politics, and talking about education should happen even in the most complicated of times, because there is no future without education, as well as there is no future without many other things, but we're not going to talk about them today. So let's hike to, I want to ask you about one of your ideas. You said that the people of Armenia do not have access to quality education. What were you trying to say? First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Mark. Despite the previous list of your guests, for me, it's a great honor to be a part of this list. I will post this video on our channel, so I recommend all of our subscribers to also subscribe to Future Studio in Facebook to watch your series, because we will be talking about the informational field that we can see, and the work that you are doing is very, very important for the development of our informational field. As for the list of guests, in the future, we want to see younger ones. And despite the fact you have less hair on your head than I do, you are significantly younger. And this is where I give you the microphone. About education, first of all, I'd like to say that in Armenia, there is no sphere that didn't go through a crisis, starting from medicine, transport, management, IT, which is considered a developed sphere. It's going through crisis because it's going through an intense demand for specialists, for example. And the universal answer to this question is education. We have serious problems with education. And in reality, if we have a look at it from a different point of view, it's not the problem. The problem is not in education. The problem is of our approach to education. We do understand that in the 21st century, almost any person in Goris, in Bangladesh, I mean, uh, don't mean the country, has access to education. They cover all basic needs. Online courses do for anyone who wants to learn online, who wants to educate themselves. But because we have a in-depth problem with our approach to education, that's exactly the thing that it becomes the reason for our people not having access to education, because they don't have that access in their head. Coincidentally, I can bring an example from my own life. Almost every summer, both in both every summer for all 3 months, I would spend in Armenia. Part of the time I would spend in Yerevan, and part in Norapat. It's in the Armavir province. I would spend it in the village, and all the time, kids were engaged in fights and conflicts. In Armenia, I encountered the word dodik, the word that describes educated people. There is the approach to successful people, the approach to success stories in Armenia is different. So if we talk about education, we can't talk about the kind of informational field people live in and the context that they live in and how that context affects their treatment of success and the possibilities. So we do not have access to education just because in our heads we don't have an understanding of what do we need education for. So let's say those who know English do have access to education. That implies that English in schools should be on a better level, put on a better track in schools. That's a very good idea. English should be an obligatory language. We need 3 obligatory state languages: English, Russian, and Armenian. I would put them in a different sequence. No, we're not talking about the order. But in general, 3 languages are a must have that should be in Armenian education, and each next language is a bonus, is to the necessary 3, because languages are possibilities, because it's a dogma that people need to understand. Why do our schools lack a reasonable level of English? Probably Russian too. It's in-depth problems of the our education system, that our teachers get wages of 70, 80,000 drams per month, that we have a very bad, low quality rotation of positions. But that problem isn't solved if those teachers weren't paid 70, 80,000 drams, but we were paid 700, 800. There will be the same teachers. That's not the only factor that affects the capabilities of teachers. It's obvious that for 70, 80,000, there is a lot of enthusiasts who do their work honestly, but that's a basic necessity. If you want quality education, you need a teacher to be respected. The teacher is not respected because if they're receiving 70, 80,000. Our teachers work in regular Armenian schools, then they go through training. We have teachers that receive $1,000 per month or even more, and their motivation is incredible. They not only do their work, they develop the platform. They constantly educate themselves. They offer new ideas. They are already in a context of their own development because they're very motivated for the development of our school, and they're motivated to be better and better because they know that the competition is very serious. And apart from solving from that fundamental question, of course, giving 700,000 drams to a teacher is not a full solution. We need to innovate in education. We need to have a look at how do we see our education? What do we imagine when we talk about school education? We're talking about the Soviet model that was formed, then it fell apart, then it became like it is now. Or do we want to study what's going on in the world with schools and adopt the best practices? Look, while you were talking, I got 2 big comments. Comment number 1: you mentioned that all spheres are going through a crisis. Naturally, education is also going through a crisis. I believe that our thinking is also going through a crisis. As Soviet thinking isn't working anymore because there are no Soviet realities, the new thinking that should come in the stead of the Soviet thinking isn't coming because the new realities are very weak. They're very foggy. The new teacher who has worked as a teacher for 30 years, that's a great period. Those are tens of thousands of students students that can call that person their teacher, and he's a bad teacher. What do we do? You do understand what I'm saying. It's not an aspect of, it's not an administrative aspect, it's a social aspect. You know, you've noted very well that it's very everything is very foggy right now. We are living in a very fast changing world. What does that just mean? The knowledge that we're gaining today may be useless in a year or two. We must recognize that we need to constantly to learn something. And I'm not just saying we as school students, I'm saying 40, 50, 60-year-old people should be in the process of self-development, self-education, and correspondingly, if we're talking about a teacher with a 30-year experience as they are, and they don't want to change, they cannot match the conditions of the modern world. Those are the game rules in the modern world. That is also a very important social issue, because we want the world to change, but we don't want to change ourselves. And you know how? The absence of this change is supported on a legal level. Look, the teacher, the hypothetical teacher who has a 30-year experience, they can say, what, I was a good teacher for 30 years, and now I'm not. I've 28,000 students have graduated. What, am I good enough for them and not good enough for these young ones? That's not a problem of that sphere. That's a problem of all spheres. And when we're talking about education, I'm coming back to your words. When we're talking about a systematic crisis that needs to be overcome, this needs to be overcome also. That's a very important aspect. When we say education, do we only imply state education? And that's a very small part of modern education that exists. There are universities and schools, etc. Now we're developing informal education, short-term courses that last for a year, 6 months, that give you a certain amount of skills that you need right now so that you could apply them in some sort of your own activity. I should honestly say that I don't see that the state is capable of changing to simplify the process of change in education, because that requires a very strong will and very skilled specialists, and I don't see them engaged here. Maybe if they are engaged, maybe in the next 5, 10, 15 years, those changes can happen on a massive scale. But if we're talking about education in Armenia, I would bet on informal education, on some uh, private initiatives that can have a future, because a lot of people say that people don't have money, so they won't be using paid education. I think that's a myth. Because if people have the possibility to take out a loan, huge loans, to celebrate New Year's, or to that loans that are covered for years to celebrate a 500 people wedding, they take out a loan and get the education that changes their life. That's what we need to tell people. Right now, they have all the possibilities. They shouldn't wait until the state helps them. School education is a completely separate topic. Universities, that's a separate topic, but you can go through courses of marketing, programming. There are more than 100 professions that would be would make you in demand on the international market. You know what? As a journalist, I need to tell you that journalism is a very well demanded profession on the international market. But I should also say that for journalism faculties in several Armenian universities, for students, it's absolutely normal to skip classes, to skip specialized classes. When you skip those classes, you grow as someone who doesn't know their own specialization, but it's just enough for the professor to give a student a bad grade. He is under pressure. The relatives of the professor, their friends, his classmate, his directors. Oh, it's such a good kid, such a good girl. And I'm not judging the student to be a good girl or not. That's not my judgment. And the situation when a person goes to the store and pays for to not get the goods, that also needs to be changed somehow. Specifically about the journalism faculty. Right now, we're launching a channel which will be fully in Armenian. And in the last 5 months, 70 people went through an interview. They worked to become an editor/researcher. So they had certain topics, they were inserting certain text, and out of those 70 people, we managed to find 3 people that wanted to learn how to do research. In the country, journalism is dedicated to conduct informational war, do low quality, may write low quality texts, enter debates and polemics. That's the goal of journalism right now in the country. And for that, it's not necessary to go to courses in the university. You can get enough practice in your yard for that. That quite a problem exists and it needs to be solved. Informational war. It's not a secret for anyone that indeed there is an informational war, and it's on the principle of everyone against everyone. Yes, it's a free for all. What does that mean for you? And how much do we need it? I think it's what supports the movement of Armenia to the catastrophe towards Armenia is going. Because that's just because we are us and we are not them. We're constantly kicking each other. That will never lead to anything good. Using the possibility, I'm summoning all people who are creating any content in Armenia. Stop antagonizing. We are greatly responsible for the future of our country. If we're using our possibility to create content and to affect our listeners just because we're protecting our own interests and because we're trying to force someone out of the informational field, that will not lead to the future. That we are all together, we are carrying the responsibility for the informational field. We should stop that immediately. And we need to create as much educational content as possible, or content that inspires for self-education. That is very important. You're saying that stop it immediately, but we're approaching elections. And if I destroy my opponents properly, I will be able to win the elections and I will have a future. And when the one who someone wins the elections and just a tiny bit of Armenia is left in the end, to understand it, people need to understand it. Without the understanding, nothing will change. What do I want to say? When I was preparing to this interview, I conducted a short research. What do people watch in Armenia? We don't have any localization of YouTube. We can't have a look in trends. What's the trend? We have a special tool called vidIQ. Anyone who's watching this video can download it, a paid version. What do people watch in Armenia in the last 30 days? I noted down the names of the video. There's a channel. This is not advertisement for that channel. Probably we're being watched by thinking people. We have a channel called The Great Armenia. And from the 10 videos they have that are in trends in Armenia, it's 5, 6 videos. Panic in Turkey, Erdogan is leaving, 160,000 views. The French army is coming to Armenia. Lavrov's sensational words, those lands are Armenian. Those are fake news. Those are not just fake news, that's what people want to hear. They put it in the name, make a video out of it, and people act like cats. They come to get petted. Our society wants to be petted, tell them that they're so good. Lavrov supported us, Macron supported us. That has nothing to do with reality. But people enjoy these emotions. While this informational field doesn't change, we can't have an educated society in this informational field. Maybe it's vice versa. Maybe that's a reasonable connection. It works both ways. This informational field is creating this uneducated society, and this uneducated society is creating this informational field. They support each other. Yes. Can we call this maybe some form of infantilism? Yes, we can. How do we overcome it? All of the crises we're going through, the only way to overcome them is to put people in a new informational context. We need to engage people into a new informational context, which will support their understanding of what changes they can see, what kind of success they themselves can reach when they start studying something new, when they start going through absolutely new content. People who consume the greater media, or people who read Harari or Taleb, or read some kind of content that supports their development, they can't. The first group cannot compete with them, and they will need to understand that. And there's a billion instruments created in the 21st century. There's this gift of humanity to everyone, which is absolutely unused. We have a huge field of possibilities that we can start using right now, and that will give us a great technical change in society. Hayk, everything you're saying is in the internet. What about the television? I don't believe in TV. I believe that most people watch TV in Armenia, but thinking people are transitioning to the internet because they can choose the content themselves. They're not getting the content that is being chosen for them, and it's our goal also, so that television drops its grip and attract people to the internet, as much people as possible. But there are other means. You can bring TV to the internet. In Armenia, if you have a look at the top of the YouTube, we have mostly TV channels. Perfect. This means that TV is already on the internet. In general, I think it's unclear. The internet is a means to develop content to the consumer. TV is also a means on delivering content to the consumer. They can be combined. They don't need to be opposed, but I can see what is behind that antagonization. Because in TV, you only see entertainment. You only see the not serious content. I see in television the following, and in general, how I see content consumption in the world and how internet changed it. There is a huge decentralization of productional means. In the past, when you needed a channel, a TV channel, instead of delivering the channel to a certain part of your listeners, of your viewers, now a lot of small channels can create content and deliver it to their watchers. There's only one problem with television. It's in someone's hands, in the state's hands, or in some private hands, and it's primarily serving the interests of that person. If it's a good person, but in the general understanding, someone who matches our interests. Let's call it that way. A good person can create a lot of high quality content that will teach people, that will educate people, that will direct the person to want to develop, motivate them for development. And if that's a person that we do not like, he will create content that he needs right now to solve his current problems. And in Armenian TV, we have a great possibility right now, at least for the public TV, to improve the quality and the quantity of content. They don't need to be boring, uninteresting things. Educational content can be very, very interesting, and it's an aspect of treatment of work, approach to work, and it's also an aspect of talent, and it's a question of management, right? Because management, does it or not, it has its own opinion on the TV and their own understanding of how it should develop. You have founded a YouTube channel. Undoubtedly, you understand what context advertising is and how you can make money on YouTube. Let me say, put it the following way. Making money on YouTube is possible with big viewer bases. If purely on YouTube, million views, YouTube can give you $1,000. That's not a very big sum. But you can integrate advertisement. But you need to create content that will depend on the advertiser. Our YouTube channel, for example, the fact that it is surviving and developing, it's because of donations. We have 280 people who donate. They've connected their card and they pay out of their pocket so that we create this content. That's a very important element of what we're doing, because the viewers feel the responsibility. They believe that this content is necessary and they're willing to pay for it. It's a very interesting approach to how content should be created and at whose expense. If it's the viewer who's paying for it and there's no identified, we have $2,800 coming in every month, that means that the viewer feels the lack of good content and they believe that you can pay for good content. That means that the viewers that are paying is very responsible and they're willing to pay out of their pocket with money. They put their money where the mouth is. Look, for quite a while, we've been talking about the internet, about content, etc. But we're not talking about journalism. On purpose, this question, I had it on the tip of my tongue. I was expecting you to say that word. I'm not a journalist. That is journalism dead? I don't think so. I think that journalism is not dead. It cannot die. What is professional journalism? You perfectly know that because you're a professional journalist. I'm not a professional journalist. I'm just a person who puts a camera in front of him and tells what he thinks is necessary, and he gets a certain viewer base. Professional journalism, it's not that it's not dead yet. It hasn't reformatted into a new reality. Let me bring you an example. In the Russian language YouTube, there is a Pivovarova's channel. It's a professional journalism on YouTube. It's alive and it is flowering, it is flourishing. If you have a look, you can feel that it's actual, real professional journalism. Journalism also needs to be reformatted. It's necessary to get rid of what we already have. A lot of people have their own zone of comfort and they don't want to leave it. They don't want to see change. And because of that, professional journalism hasn't fully yet encased the internet. I'm not saying that I won't be able to compete with professional journalism when it reaches the internet. That there are two elements, 2 points that are very important for journalism. If is it the internet, or is it TV, radio, or newspapers that don't exist anymore? First of all, in Armenia, they don't exist. In the world, there are newspapers and they are flourishing. First, it's what the journalist is producing should be interesting. It's very important. The result of your work needs to be interesting. And second, the second point, a journalist should be independent, because if he's working for some political or business interest, it is visible. Good journalists do not multiply in zoos. Internet gives us the freedom that traditional media do not give us. Internet provides this level of freedom. Any journalist can create their own channel. It doesn't need to be a YouTube channel. It can be a Telegram channel. It can be something else. And it can gather a viewer base, a reader base who will pay for their content, and not just paying for the content. It can attract advertisers. In the infrastructure exists. There is no, and just the people don't have the understanding of how to use it. Apart from what you've already said, those can be also podcasts that are also popularized in the internet. So there's a problem of creativity too. Can you educate creativity? Can you help Armenians to be more creative? That's a very good question. Recently, I've been told that in South Korea, for years when they were developing production, they didn't have, they weren't supporting creativity at all. And now in the real world, they feel a huge gap in that. So a significant part of education in South Korea is dedicated to the development of creativity, so that South Koreans are creative. So if they're spending insane money on that and they're dedicating a significant part of their education to that, they will reach that. And I think we also should develop in that direction. We can, or we need, in absolutely need. In the 21st century, creativity is a basic skill that can guarantee you success. It doesn't matter what kind of knowledge do you have. Right now, the knowledge that you have doesn't matter at all. It only matters how fast you can learn new skills. And the greatest skill in the 21st century is creativity. Everything that is automatized will be taken over by robots, by AIs, and each person only needs to keep creativity. I will not agree with you here, because creativity cannot exist without knowledge. Without knowing what a bicycle is, I can invent it. And it will be a genius invention, but it will be useless because the bicycle already exists and I should have known that it existed. There is there's an expression, uh, one time in our discussion, Tigran Mansourian, the composer, in discussion with me, it wasn't as part of the Future Studio, it was a private discussion. He said the composer needs to know the rules to be able to violate them. Creativity is a part of knowing the rules and being able to violate them for a good conclusion. And I'm not saying that it's necessary. It doesn't matter what kind of knowledge. So the knowledge that you have right now, at any moment, you can have any knowledge, because the access to this knowledge in our world is, you just need to spend your time and effort and to gain that knowledge. But without creativity, you won't be able to transform that knowledge into some sort of product or some sort of activity. But of course, knowledge is necessary. Look, Hayk, let it be my last question. We started from education, then we went to information, media, and the internet. As I understand, for you, these two concepts are very close to each other. Maybe I'm mistaken, they flow from one into another. How? How does that happen? How does education and internet, how they are connected to each other? I believe that those things are inseparable. What does the internet give us? Internet is access to information. Nothing else is just access to information. And now the question is, what kind of information are you consuming? In the end, that is until we had internet, we had a lot of information that we couldn't consume, a lot of very specialized information. But now we have access to information. I won't even say years, months. In months, it can change the quality of our lives. The saddest thing that I see in Armenia nowadays is when I call a cab. Is the saddest part. I call a cab, a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old young man arrives who can create a huge additional value engaged in any activity that could seriously help both him and in his life and the country for development. But because he didn't have the informational context that would bring him to that path of education and development, or he had others other disappointments in his life that brought him to the wheel, and he's now driving a cab. And our goal is to have that possibility. I think we have that possibility. This situation of the 21st century is the best time where people could live the greatest amount of possibilities that we have right now, that more than any person. You don't need to be rich anymore or successful. You just need to consume the information that will move you forward. This is perfectly formulated. Consume, and reproduce. To reproduce something, you need to have the knowledge that you will be using for reproduction. And if you're consuming information that says that the French army will be here soon, you won't be able to produce anything. Well, that's a myth. We do like myths. We like myths. We like them. We create them. And I often say that when the world is engaged with reality, it always creates myths. Thank you very much. My guest today was the founder of the Armenian school Tumanyan.Online and the author of the YouTube channel Repat Riarch, Hayk Hovakimyan. Thank you.